Hi guys, welcome to the podcast. I'm the Sandman, and before we get started today, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to a good cause, and that's Bad Moon Cafe. They are our friendly local gaming store and are based in South London. Like lots of places, they're obviously entering a really difficult period whilst Nurgle terrorises the planet, and our friend Lewis Chapman has put together a Just Giving page for them, and we would love it if as many people as possible could support. We'll obviously put the link below. You can also support them by visiting their website at badmooncafe.co.uk, where you can both purchase merchandise or buy credit, which can be redeemed at a later date. So thanks very much for listening, and enjoy the rest of the podcast.
Miniature soldiers, big opinions. This is the Conclave Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Conclave Podcast. I'm the Sandman, and joining me today we have Adam in the legal department. How are you, Adam?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. And terrifyingly tonight, we have somebody that hails from the realms of chaos. Interestingly, I actually met him in Hong Kong, though, a slightly different place. But today we have AJ, aka Alfred Farius. How are you tonight, AJ?
I am good. How are you?
I'm good. So we wanted to do an episode to talk about all the things that are good, in quotes, and and to do with chaos. So yeah, you actually started like straight away with chaos, and you've been loyal, again in quotes, all the way through. So what was it about chaos that first attracted you to them there, AJ?
Yeah, well, so my sort of more recent hobby history, I played a lot, like a lot of people, when I was, 12, 13, and I was in 3rd edition, really big into the hobby, stopped for a while. And then in Hong Kong, when Ed and I met, we sort of started playing kill team. And at first, I played like various chaos kill teams. So I had like a Plague Marine kill team, a Rubric Marine kill team, I think I got some berserkers, and then all of a sudden I realized I was slowly building up a Black Legion force just by, building all these kill teams. And then I was like, right, I'm in. And then the full-fledged Black Legion, and then slowly built up my armies from there.
Awesome. And so what does, for a lot of our, listeners that are new to the hobby, what does chaos mean to you? Well, what does it mean when we say chaos?
So the Chaos Forces, it's actually a number of different factions within the game. And broadly speaking, they worship one of 4 or many of 4 main Chaos gods. There's actually, in the lore, many more Chaos gods than that, but there's 4 main ones. And you've got your Nurgle, the god of decay. You've got your Tzeentch, your god of change, technically, and wisdom and trickery. Slanesh, the god of excess, and Khorne, the blood god. And between these 4, you have your Chaos Forces.
And Nurgle's big right now.
and they very famously work very well together. Is that right?
It depends on the situation. Sometimes they will form uneasy alliances for the greater bad, let's say. But for the most part, they're just as likely to hurt each other as others.
Yeah, I think that's the super interesting part about chaos. I think Karim said this on the last podcast. Like we always forget that the majority of the time that chaos are fighting, they're fighting each other, and that's what makes them so fascinating. So talk to us about your army. So what's been your progression from one chaos faction to another, and how did you navigate that kind of that journey?
Yeah, broadly in my mind, I thought to myself, right, because one great thing in the hobby about chaos is it is, as I say, a number of armies. And in my mind, if I keep to that sort of theme, then as I'm starting a new army, I can ally them into my existing ones. So, for example, if you wanted to do Nurgle Demons, and you also wanted to do Death Guard, who are a Nurgle-aligned sort of human Space Marine force, you can ally those together. It has some great synergies, but at the same time, you're building 2 separate armies that you can play separately as well. And for me, I thought that's a really good thing about collecting Chaos, because you can just slowly expand your collection with all the different sub-factions of Chaos within. Because, if I was to start an orc army right now and I only had 500 points of orcs, that's what I'd have, 500 points of orcs. I couldn't then ally in anything else from my other forces, and I would only be able to play 500-point games. Whereas this way, if I've made 500 points of, say, berserkers for world eaters, I can just ally that in with one of my other armies, and then I can have fun with it while I'm still building that force up.
That's cool. I really like that. I think Chaos probably far more than the Imperium is kind of incentivized to soup, and I think we actually do see that from a bit of a rules perspective. A lot of people might have forgotten now, but if you have one of the Chaos Codexes from 8th edition, you will know that there's actually demons in that codex, and you now can't take them in those detachments because originally at the start of 8th they intended for people to take more Chaos or Imperium detachments. But it's a really interesting idea, I think, and it definitely makes me wonder whether that will come back in 9th edition, whether we will get blood letters in Chaos Space Marine detachments. Maybe they'll figure out a way to make that work with the keywords, because there's definitely some intent there, clearly, from the rules writers.
I hope so. I hope they do that. I think, I agree. I think with AJ, and I have a Death Guard army. That's my chaotic sort of extent to which I get into it, and the idea of bringing in Nurglings and Plague Bearers, which are the Nurgle demons, I just think is very cool. And I feel like the legions, so when we're talking about the legions as well, when AJ says there are these worshippers of the gods, there are Chaos Legions in much the same way there are Space Marine chapters that worship a specific god. So, the Death Guard, as AJ says, worship Nurgle. It'd be really cool if, even if Chaos Space Marines maybe generally didn't get it, that the specific legion, sort of one of the bonuses you should get is to be able to bring in those demons. So, Death Guard bring in Nurgle demons, Emperor's Children bring in some, there's the police going after the Emperor's Children right now. They've been doing them at some excess. Bring in some Slaanesh demons. I just think that'd be so cool. It'd be be so fun.
Yeah, totally. Especially because some of the ranges are quite small. So, like, for example, if you're a massive fan of Slaaneshi lore, that's great. But unfortunately, if you just focus on a Chaos Space Marine faction, there's not too many things that are focused on Slaanesh. So if you were able to take ally on demons just a bit more easily, I think it becomes a bit more awesome, to be honest. Expand your range quite significantly.
The latest army, my latest Chaos force I'm working on is actually an Emperor's Children allied with Slaanesh Demons force, and that's mainly because the synergies lie within the fact that Slaanesh Demons have their demonic loci, and the Slaanesh one means that you can advance and charge Slaanesh demon units within 6 inches. And the demon engines on the Emperor's Children side have those keywords, Slaanesh and demon. So I'm building that together with the idea that I'm using Venom Crawlers because they're the only, as far as I can tell, the only demon engine that has assault weapons. So everything is just going to be advancing all game. Just a really quick army with big monsters that advance up the field and do the work.
That's awesome. I absolutely love that. I think that's the real kind of innovation that I love to see in lists. I think that there was a particular strong combo, kind of similar kind of thing there, when you had the Crimson Crown from the Khorne detachment, and obviously Khorne demons. When they wrote those rules, they didn't expect them to have many guns. But the Lord of Skulls, on the other hand, has some very, very powerful guns. So people would take one of them, and then it would just the multiplier effect of having 6s explode to hit with the new demon engine rules and 6s exploding to wound is quite something to play against, to be honest.
I distinctly remember after one of the London Wargaming Guild tournaments we've mentioned in other episodes, the Winter Warfare. I distinctly remember standing in a pub in Shepherd's Bush whilst we were sort of talked at, myself and Sandman, by somebody who was an evangelist for the 3 Khorne Lord of Skulls and sort of Crimson Crown list. And I mean, they're probably right. It's very, very good. But it was very much, the fervor was there. It was true worship of the blood god.
Yeah. So Adam touched a bit there, AJ, on this idea that we have the legions in Chaos Space Marines, and we also have kind of the warbands. Which do you have a preference between the two, or do you dip and dive? What's your preference?
Well, I would say that, legions more refers to the original founding traitor legions, but then you've got your, you know, renegade marines. For example, the most famous is the Red Corsairs, who are they're more like pirates who've stepped away from the Imperium to just do their own thing. They'll worship chaos as a means to an end rather than than a focused thing, and they'll just raid Imperial space for whatever they want and do whatever they want, and that's also part of the lore-wise appeal of chaos. Like, you're not bound to all these rules that the Imperium have. We don't listen to any of them. We just do our own thing. Yeah, we've got the gods that we want to worship, and
no, totally.
yeah.
So basically, what you're learning here is AJ, you're a big fan of Jack Sparrow with a lightning claw. Basically.
Yeah, who isn't? Yeah.
No, I look forward to reading that book. That sounds fascinating. I think chaos are really, really cool. I also really, really like that you can kind of look at chaos in lots of ways. Chaos makes some good points. The Imperium is fundamentally a fascist dictatorship. And it's really interesting. And in fact, some people, they make chaos warbands purely from that point of view of just like, look, it's just like the black ships, the tithes, like so many things that the Imperium does are awful. Are just terrible.
It's one of those things in 40k where there's no good guys, right? Because I feel like that argument would hold a lot more water if they weren't ripping the skin off people at the same time.
Yeah. You look at flesh terrors and you're like, how do they not worship Khorne? Like, this doesn't seem right.
I think Khorne likes them.
Yeah.
Maybe not the other way around.
Yeah.
I mean, AJ, I guess for me, just one thing that I find interesting about having played against you, seen you play as well, and seeing your hobby develop, is you also do have Imperium armies, but they are
sort of.
kind of I mean, this is what I'm getting to, I guess, with the sort of, they are quite chaotic even when they're Imperium, which is quite cool. So why don't you sort of tell us what your sort of range of Imperial in air quotes is in terms of armies?
Yeah, well, from the 8th edition box set, you had your Dark Imperium, and in that box there were Plague Marines, and there was also the Primaris Marine side. And I like the models, but I was like, I can't be this filthy Imperium stuff. I can't be dealing with that. So there is one of the original traitor legions, the Alpha Legion. I decided they would be the way that I would paint all of my my Primaris stuff. And fluff-wise, what I've got one traitor librarian, and my fluff is that he sort of got his way onto one of the ships with all the grey shields, all these Primaris bound for the front, and he has used his sort of mind control Alpha Legion trickery to make them all think that they're fighting for the Imperium, when in reality they're fighting for the Alpha Legion, and he's got his own.
And they're really fighting for the Imperium.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well,
nobody
there's a lot of layers. But it's given me some opportunities to do some good conversions as well. So like my plasma inceptors, instead of plasma, I've got them firing flames from their hands, and like their heads are like burning skulls to show that they're sort of, in my mind, instead of them
still less dangerous than real plasma. Interesting.
I suppose so. Yeah. But like I've got them, instead of coming down from orbit, they're being summoned like sort of demons that come in, and their fire is hellfire, and yeah. It's the kind of thing I like to do.
What have you got? Have you got a favourite conversion that you've done, which you can all find at Alfred Ferris? Link below for listeners.
I've got my most recent ones. I started making some Lord Discordants for my Emperor's Children, and literally, like, that's one of the fun things about Chaos. I've just got this box of bits, and I was like, right, what can I make out of this? And I made this abomination out of chaotic bits and pieces and tentacles and spikes and I think it looks really cool, and it's just that's the fun of it.
Is this the one you've put on your Instagram? Is this the one I'm thinking of? The squid?
Oh, there's also the squid. So I've done
the squid's cool.
Yeah. So I've done one that's a squid discordant, and he's got his trident is made of chainswords, so he's got a chainsaw sword trident, and that I just thought was really metal. And then I've got another one that's more of like, he's made a bit more of Skaven bits, so he's riding like a giant rat thing. And he's got like a samurai aesthetic to him, because I gave him a samurai sword for no particular reason, other than I thought it was cool.
That's awesome. I love that. So you and I actually started in Hong Kong, and I always say to people when I talk about my kind of 40k journey, like, so I started with Tau, and you started with kind of Chaos Space Marines after we'd moved on from Kill Team. Now, bit of a skill threshold difference there, certainly in 8th edition. Like, I remember being like, I think this game's quite easy because there's not many difficult decisions. What is it about Chaos Space Marines that you think that makes him quite a challenging faction to play?
I mean, at the moment, I would say Tower, a more challenging faction to play in 9th edition.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, there are some things about Chaos. They've had a bit of a history. I mean, like, I can't think of any unit that's had more nerfs than the Cultist, the lowly Cultist, because it went from, I mean, points is one thing, but it went from being able to not have Legion traits. They took away the ability to use one of its key strategies, Tide of Traitors, multiple times. They took away the number of cultists you could put in a unit, and it's just one thing after another. And then, people always compare them to the Guardsmen because they have exactly the same profile, except for some reason cultists are more expensive. This is a constant annoyance. Yeah. They're the same now, right?
Oh, is it the same now? They have the same.
Oh, they might be. I need to look it up.
I think they're still a 6-up and Garda a 5-up. That's the real kick in the teeth.
Oh, yeah.
It's a decent difference as well. Like I mean, is it 2 or 3 points?
No, I think it's just a point different. I think.
Oh, it's only a point. Okay.
Yeah. I think to be honest, they got quite punished because of Abaddon. So for kind of newer listeners, like at the start of mid 8th edition, Abaddon and just like 120 cultists was a reasonably good list, and that did pretty well at tournaments just because of its board control, and also there's a very, very powerful stratagem called Tide of Traitors, which brings back a high, like, as long as it's like playing its old Necrons. If there's one traitor cultist left, then all his friends come back, and they used to come in blobs of 30. So it was quite good, and because Abaddon made them fearless, they were quite viable, because when you took away Abaddon, and Iron Warriors have a Warlord trait that's the same thing. When they don't have that, they used to die to morale pretty quickly. So I think I always felt a bit conflicted on that, because also I didn't want Abaddon to be punished, because Abaddon should be. I want Abaddon to. He's quite cheap now, to be fair, but I want him to be quite cheap so that he sees a lot of play. It's always been a shame though, because the cultists being expensive would be fine if the Chaos Space Marine was good, but the Chaos Space Marine, I mean, as all Space Marines kind of were throughout most of 8th, it's kind of fell behind. Obviously we know the 2 wounds are coming, which is really, really exciting, and should make a huge difference. So kind of a couple questions from this. Firstly, what of the outside of the Chaos Space Marine himself, the other kind of units that you have that were going up to 2 wounds, what are you excited to see go to 2 wounds, and why?
So for me, there's a few units that will do really well out of having the extra wound. The first one that comes to mind is Warp Talons. So they are. So there's changes that have just come out to Lightning Claws that mean that you get an extra attack per claw, which means that Warp Talons will go up to 3 or 4 attacks on the charge each. I'm not 100% sure.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yeah.
And in addition, they've got the demon keyword, so you can get a lot of extra synergies by having that demon keyword. As I mentioned before, like if it was a Slanesh Warp Talon, you could have it advancing and charging.
I quite like that. I mentioned them in the podcast actually. I quite like them as creations of Bile, because the re-rolling wounds, which is obviously a massive, amazing thing from Lightning Claws, becomes significantly better when you get to Strength 5. And I don't think, I mean, I'm not a Chaos expert at all, but I don't think there's too many ways of getting that.
Well, there's always Veterans of the Long War, so +1 to wound.
Yeah.
In addition,
that becomes wounding knights on 4s re-rolling.
Could you also? I know the Emperor's Children have a strat, right, where they can pick a unit pre-game and sort of give it +1 strength, +1 tough, or +1 toughness, right, or +1 attack. Is that right? Yeah. So I guess you could do it that way as well. Again, for that's it. There you go. You Emperor's Children. So you can use that.
Pretty really cool. I love that.
And as well, I mean, I would use that strat in particular on Terminators, like Chaos Terminators. the advantage of them over the Imperial ones is you've got a lot more customization with the weapons. Like you can give them all different kinds of combi weapons. I think an interesting thing that might happen is now that the flamer is up to 12-inch range, you could put combi flamers on all of them, and then you can have them drop down, shoot flamers twice with +1 to wound from Veterans of the Long War. It's a lot of auto hits that.
Hopefully with doctrines.
Well, yeah, we'll see what they get.
Something at least, something. Yeah.
You're gonna have a copyright suit launched at you by salamanders.
Yeah.
It's all right, Adam. You can defend us. No, that's awesome. Yeah. No, warped hands are a really, really big one. I think as well. There's a lot of the God Marines that are going to become quite good quite quickly. So rubrics and Plague Marines are already very, very good, as everybody knows, and that is quite scary as a Space Marine fan. Like, yes, I mean, do you see that coming?
Yeah, So if for anyone who doesn't know, the next Chaos Codex, or the only one actually they've announced, is Death Guard. So the first of all these different types of Chaos Marines to get the extra wound will be the Plague Marines. And that's going to be, it gets pretty obnoxious when your basic troops have toughness 5, 2 wounds, 3 up base save, 5 up feel no pain. Like, it's tough to remove.
How do you feel about this, Adam?
I know. I think it's going to be. I am. And AJ and I have we've all talked about this, I guess, outside of the podcast previously. I think it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with the Death Guard Codex for 2 reasons. Number one, as AJ absolutely correctly says, let's be perfectly honest, a toughness 5 2 wound model with a 3 up save and a 5 up invent save. That's before we even get into the world of some of the Death Guard Terminators, who in theory are going to be 3 wounds, and are already very difficult to kill and have invents.
4 up invent.
Yeah, 4 up invent, exactly. So that is just quite obnoxious, and the Death Guard at the moment are very, very, very good in ninth because of the way the game works, and they're kind of the things. I mean, I won't go into it in detail because this episode is not a Death Guard fan club, but what they do and the way the game works just synergize very well together. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see whether they change anything, whether they balance it. But yeah, on paper, 2 wound Plague Marines to play against, frightening. To play with, feels bad. I don't know.
So moving on to that, my second question there, and this isn't exclusively to Chaos Space Marines, but as a Chaos fan, what kind of changes would you like to see for the game for Chaos Space Marines or Knights or Demons or whatever? Yeah,
I think I'm not the only one who thinks this, but for me, as I said, I'm starting this Emperor's Children collection. They really need to make an Emperor's Children book in the same way that they've made a Thousand Suns book and they've made a Death Card book. It's the logical next God-specific Chaos faction to get one would be the Emperor's Children. And some of those models, like they released a one-off Noise Marine model. I think it must have been, is it 2 years ago now? Maybe they released that.
It was quite a while. I think maybe a year and a half, maybe.
I remember it coming out at Christmas because I got it for Christmas.
This year's just been a blur, right? So he's
already on his leaving tour. It's been
But I mean, a whole army of just guys with guitar guns just blaring away. It's so awesome. Yeah. They need to do that.
I think obviously looking at the other 2 books, one of the big drivers there certainly has been Demon Primarchs. And I think it, much as we like to speculate about Loyalist Primarchs, we don't really know. A lot of people say that the plan for GW was never to go into the Loyalist Primarchs. I don't believe this is the case in the core of my being. But certainly, the Demon Primarchs, we know, the intention is that they're going to bring them back one by one. Certainly, 4 main Chaos Gods. So Fulgrim coming back is a pretty big deal. Obviously, we know that he and Guilliman have a hell of a rivalry. Which of the Demon Primarchs do you think would you like to see come back the most, and kind of why?
I mean, probably Fulgrim, if I'm honest, because if you've seen, for anyone who doesn't know, in the lore, Fulgrim is now, he's a full-on demon. He's sort of a big snake man, or if he even has a gender at the moment. Slaanesh tend to go between these things. But he, if you've seen the models they've done in AOS of Morathi or Morat, I can't remember. There's an elf snake lady.
That sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Daughters of Cain, isn't it? The army.
Yeah.
Daughters of Cain. Yeah.
But if they do something like that, but with more 40k-ness, I'd be in for
So
sure.
cool.
So
So cool.
the lore there essentially is the Leia, who were the alien race that Fulgrim was exterminating when he found the sword that eventually corrupted him. Fulgrim that is going, and this is a lot of the irony of 40k. Fulgrim actually now resembles that species. That's what he now looks like, which is really really cool. I think one of my favourite parts of 40k, and I suspect it's a big part for you because I know you're a big Black Legion fan, is kind of the undivided chaos. Like, so for me, the fascinating thing, I'm just so interested to know what Perturabo looks like as a demon Primarch.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's just so many opportunities there. I'm also so fascinated by the fall of Perturabo because, and we talked about in the last podcast how like, our impressions of Dawn had changed, and my impression of Perturabo has also changed quite a lot. I'm now a big Perturabo fan, but certainly presently in the lore, in the heresy, which is now the Siege of Terror, is as far as we've gotten. Like, Perturabo is so anti chaos. Like, he sees what's happened to Horus. He thinks that you can tell he thinks it's a mistake. He's a lot aligned with Abaddon, I think, in that kind of mindset. So like, how do you guys see him falling? I mean, obviously the Iron Cage is to do with it, but how do we see Perturabo falling?
I think with Perturabo, and I 100% echo what you've just said. Having read the Horus Heresy, the Siege of Terror novels, he has gone from being this sort of slightly annoying, slightly whiny character in a lot of the background, throughout, I think pre maybe the Horus Heresy, to actually being, he's really cool, and he is hard done by in some ways. He got a bit of a bad, rep in the jobs he was given to do when he could have done during the heresy by both the Imperium and the Chaos Forces in the end, or the Horus's armies. But he is this strategic genius. So for me, I wonder if it comes down to utility, because he strikes me as somebody who he does things if he thinks look, I don't necessarily like this, but this will give me an advantage. This will make me strong. And I do wonder if for him, whereas for Fulgrim it was, when we talk about him becoming a demon, and by the way, the novel with both Fulgrim and Perturabo, where that happens, is very cool. Angel Exterminatus, yeah. Listeners who haven't read it or want to read some stuff around the Horus Heresy, that's a great book. I feel like he will rather than doing it for sort of almost, I know it's going to sound bizarre, I'm saying it's not selfish reasons, because I think for Fulgrim it's all about the promotion itself. I think for Perturabo it's not so much about that, it's about just, this makes me better at what I can do, and it's not actually about him, it's just making, so then I can lead the Iron Warriors. So it'd be interesting to see if his Legion and him as a model kind of come back to the fore a bit more, if they released a model of him. Also, it just looked very cool. I mean, he's like a giant obliterator, right? I mean, he's this...
In the 30k, they've got their character series, and the model that they made of him looks amazing. He's just all covered in wires and guns, and
I think he's a fascinating character. I think what's super interesting about that, I won't, hopefully Quip still won't listen to this, but for Imperial Fist fans, like, Perturabo, it seems to me, and we haven't, the Scouring hasn't been written yet, but it definitely seems like he wins the kind of the rivalry with Dawn. I mean, let's call the Siege of Terror a draw. I think that's probably the fairest way of looking at it between the two of them. But like, the Iron Cage is undoubtedly an Iron Warrior success. And like, quite very soundly, very nearly white. If it wasn't for Gilliman, as we know, the Imperial Fist would be no more. So I'm so fascinated by this idea that he finally kind of like achieves everything he wants to. He humiliates Dawn. He basically nearly wipes out his entire lineage, and then he goes like, and then he kind of like gives in to the other side. Because obviously, when we look at Mortarion, Fulgrim not so much, I guess, but like I guess, well, Angron's a bit crazy, but most of them kind of turn to chaos through desperation, and he clearly doesn't need that, and yet still accepts demonhood. So yeah, AJ. So what kind of stuff have you been working on? In lockdown, you've definitely been, I think, the most successful of all of us throughout the lockdown period.
I mean, successful is a word. I think I've definitely made and done a lot. There's a lot of things that this lockdown has allowed me to do that I had been putting off for so long. I remember at the start, I finally finished my Kaitan demon engine. He's this giant corn beast. He's like the size of a knight. I've put him on this lava base and got all the lava sort of glow effects going on him, which I thought was really cool. Then I made the biggest thing, which is only chaos related, is that I made an AdMech army, but it's a dark Mechanicus army, and that was all done through lockdown. So I guess the cool thing about chaos is that aesthetically, you can just chaosify things by putting more spikes on, putting more, blood around. And for me, I really like working with green stuff and sort of sculpting my own things out of green stuff, because if I don't like the original model, I'll just do my own thing and I'll make something, in my mind, as long as it's got the right weapons and looks very similarly, or it's clear to your opponent what you're making, and also that you're not going to big tournaments, then do what you like. It's your hobby. Make the things that you want to make.
Yeah, I think that's true. I don't think many people do mind, really. Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned chaosifying. I think Nurgle Demon Prince. If you've never Googled that, do Google it. The scale of things people do for Nurgle Demon Prince is just amazing. And you can basically use anything, which is really, really cool. And so, how have your games in 9th edition gone so far?
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to get a few games in. Mostly, I have, because the latest competitive lists for Chaos are mostly Death Guard, just because Death Guard plays so well to the 9th edition missions. When your goal, when your goal is to take and hold specific points on the battlefield, what you want is big durable troops and really durable units that are going to get onto those points and just not die. And that's what Death Guard are really, really good at. So I've been experimenting with lists with, I've been using a battalion of Death Guard, Poxmongers. They are the plague host that gives you access to a relic that gives your demon engines a 4-up invulnerable save. And also Thousand Suns allied in, because that lets me sort of warp time Mortarion. And Mortarion is great, but if he doesn't get there, he doesn't do anything. And this is another thing about Chaos is, having access to these allies that can do things that your specific faction can't do, means that I've got my Psychers from the Thousand Suns who can push Mortarion up the board, and I played against Quipster's Custodes, and Mortarion is an absolute beast versus Custodes. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, his favourite lunch.
I think Quipster still talks about that with a sort of 1,000-yard stare.
Yeah, he was not happy after that.
Because of the way he went through the Alarus, right, the Terminator bomb.
Oh yeah. And at that point, it was a bit ridiculous. At that point, I think Mortarion had only 1 wound, and he killed most of them.
Even better.
And it was only because he failed to kill Mortarion with one of his captains. I can't remember. And then I was like, right, well, Mortarion will kill him, and then Mortarion will kill all them. Just because. For anyone who's wondering what the combo is, there is a Death Guard spell called Blades of Putrefaction. And what that spell does is you pick a Death Guard unit, and in combat you get +1 to wound, and 6s do mortal wounds in addition. And the great thing about Mortarion is when he hits an Imperial unit, you Death to the False Emperor, and it specifies in an FAQ that you can use either profile for your extra attacks that you get. So with that, you get exploding. So each of your attacks becomes 3 attacks, and any of those 6s become 3 more attacks. And it's just a huge number of attacks. And then any wounds, they become mortal wounds, and Custodes hate mortal wounds. So it was
That's
a bit silly, but
that's pretty tasty. I mean, it, to the extent that
it's pretty
Nurgle
tasty.
can ever be described as tasty, given it's all
Yeah.
rotten. That's pretty cool.
No, yeah, that is they are pretty brutal. Yeah, no, the Nurgle book is gonna be fascinating in that regard. Kind of like skill level, or like ability aside, I should say, of the army. What is your favorite faction to play of Chaos?
Of Chaos. Well, it depends the type of game, because I think one thing that people forget to talk about sometimes is when you're facing an opponent, I think it's always good, manners or sportsmanship to say, we're playing a competitive game versus we're playing a friendly game. For friendly games, I just love my Black Legion. They're the ones that I started with. They're the ones that, Abaddon is my man. He goes in, he smashes things, and I usually run them with just a smattering of a little bit of everything, just because I feel like the Black Legion they would take a bit of every force that they come into contact with. They're like, right, we defeated you, but we really like those Khorne Berserkers. Come join us or die. And so come on this crusade. And Berserkers are usually like, will there be blood? Yes, we're there.
Yeah, no, I think that's super interesting, and I think my next question is, and again, kind of putting aside the ability of Space Marines, because obviously we know Space Marines are very, very good and better than the Chaos Space Marines for a bunch of different reasons, but just kind of play style wise, assuming that their rules get improved, what are the key differences between playing Chaos Space Marines and playing Imperium Space Marines?
So in my mind, there's a few things. The main one that you'll, broadly speaking, find is that Chaos are slightly better in combat, whereas Space Marines are slightly better on the shooting side. And the example I'll give is that Chaos, they don't have a lieutenant equivalent. You can't reroll wounds to shoot, except for some rare relics. But they do have Exalted Champions, who let you reroll all wounds, but only in combat. So it incentivizes your lists to have more of a combat element, just because that character alone, is such a good force multiplier in that way.
Khorne likes this a lot, I think.
Yeah. And as well, with Chaos, their psychic disciplines tend to be very good. The main Dark Hereticus discipline that Chaos Space Marines have, almost all of those powers have seen some play in one form or another. Warp Time is a great one that lets you move a unit for a second time. Death Hex to turn off the invuln of an enemy unit is, versus Custodes especially, is crazy. Then Prescience to give a unit +1 to hit, which used to be so good on plasma units because it meant that you couldn't overheat and die, although that's now changed because plasma is unmodified. But yeah, I'd say with Chaos, a big difference is you're much more likely to see sorcerers. You're much more likely to see a big combat element, although a lot of Marine lists these days do have that. And it's the key thing they have in the Chaos Marine book, at least, is you can give each of your units a mark of Chaos. So there's 4 different gods, 4 different marks that you can give, and they do different things. So some of them will allow you to benefit from certain psychic powers. Some will allow you to benefit from certain stratagems, and you've got to sort of build your list with this in mind. And the key example would be Obliterators, who people usually take as Slanesh, because the stratagem called Endless Cacophony, which lets you shoot a unit twice, is only for Slanesh. So if you wanted to take those Obliterators as something else, like for example Nurgle, because you could do that, and then you get an access to a stratagem that lets you regen wounds on them. Like, it's fine, but it's definitely not as good. So I think it's actually a bit of a flaw in the book because the marks themselves don't really do enough. I feel like they should do more. If I was going to change the book, I'd, like the Nurgle mark should give you a toughness or something.
Yeah, I think that's been one of the big criticisms that's been out there of the way the book works in Chaos Space Marines, and I'd agree with that absolutely. Like Mark of Khorne, it should give you, I don't know if it would give you like +1 attack or it makes you like +1/+1 to move or something, like +1
Yeah.
inch or something, like to your charges, something like that, because it should just do something in and of itself. And again, now we live in a world where, I say now, we've been in it for a while with Space Marines, where we have all these, chapter tactics and sort of super doctrines that just kind of add all this stuff on if you've got a keyword, essentially for free, even though they've changed that a bit in ninth. It would be so cool. And it goes to your point about the some legions having their own books, like the Emperor's Children and the World Eaters, in the same way the Death Guard and the Thousand Suns do. It'd be cool if you just had that as well for the regular Chaos Space Marines via the mark system. Just build a bit of uniqueness in. So if you want a super combat army, give everything Mark of Khorne, go in, smash face.
Yeah, I can't express enough how much I agree with that. I think that there's a bunch of things here that we can't, of why you need it. So A, the tactical marine is kind of it's funny I say this. He's now very, very good, and he's arguably going to see probably a lot of play because he is the cheapest troop option for Space Marines. But narratively, he's kind of done. And when GW are designing the game, what they want is the Chaos Space Marine to be the counter to the Primaris Marine. Now, what I think is super interesting here is that obviously we know that Primaris Marines have a couple of advantages over the Chaos Space Marines, especially including narratively. So, like, their weaponry is a bit better because it's been approved by Belisarius School, and maybe they could have extra leadership. Maybe they will keep the extra attack. I don't know. But what would be super interesting is then we have a counter to that, and this, for me, it's kind of emphasized this idea that Chaos Space Marines, I want them to be the same but different. And
Yes.
So I want Chaos Space Marines to have that fundamentals, like similar stat line, but they do things different ways. And narratively, this obviously takes the form of them spending thousands of years in the warp, and 10,000 years in the warp, and that obviously changing their gene structure or whatever it's going to be. And I also think it would be absolutely fine because in gameplay, obviously Primaris Marines, like I said, they will have some benefits over Chaos Space Marines, and then these things will go back. It'll be a little bit tough to balance things, as Adam kind of hinted at there, like Khorne +1 attack. They'll have to play test that. If Nurgle's +1 toughness. AJ, what about you? What would you do? I'm a big fan of wild speculation, so I got to ask, what would you do for the Chaos Space Marine marks?
I think one thing I would say is that you hear sometimes Chaos people being like, oh, there should be Chaos Primaris, but I couldn't disagree more. Like, you want that difference. You want Chaos to be its own thing. Says someone who's painted their Primaris Space Marines in Chaos colours.
It's fine. We're okay with hypocrisy on this program. It's absolutely fine.
Yeah, cool. But what would I do with the marks? I think, as we've said, I want them to do more, even if that comes with a points, cost. That's fine, as long as it does something. At the moment, for example, the Mark of Khorne, right? That gives you access to the fight twice stratagem, which is great. But at the same time, it means that it doesn't do anything else. Actually, I say that the icon of Khorne is good because if you've got the Mark of Khorne, you can take the banner, and that lets you reroll charges, which is great. But it's just not enough. It needs something else.
I think one of the things as well that we can say here, for anyone that's not aware, is that this is actually not a new thing. This used to be in the game. So I think Khorne gave you +1 attack. Nurgle gave you +1 toughness. Slanesh, I think, gave you I think it was +2 movement, something like that.
Yeah, movement. I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely something that they've seen before. They'll definitely have an idea of whether it is broken in quote unquote words. And I think they definitely should do something. 100%.
Well, talking about wild speculation, right? And here I have to urge listeners and you guys as well, gathering close. Right? This is proper, like, cigarette in hand, conspiracy theory time, right?
Right.
Everyone's saying they've given Primaris Marines, they've given regular Marines 2 wounds, the old school Marines, to keep them in line, to keep them valid with the Primaris. What if it's not about that? What if it's actually about making the Chaos Space Marines actually match up to the Primaris on the wound front, and then when we see the Codex, actually what we'll see is lots of new interesting things happen with the marks that do exactly what we're asking them to do. Make them be the same and a match, but do it differently. And the reason I say that, just to move away from the sort of slightly bizarre conspiracy theory nonsense, right? The reason I say that is, and this is actually a point that Sandman made when we were just talking about this earlier before we were recording, was that if you look at the Space Marine line, they're basically replacing all of the old things that you could get as an old Marine anyway. You know, like the ATV is the replacement for the attack bike. Like, so very clearly they're looking, you know, we've known for a long time that Primaris are the replacement. So you have to kind of, if you're going to give Chaos Space Marines 2 wounds, you sort of have to give it to the Space Marine, the old school Space Marines too. So I wonder if actually the real target of this change is Chaos, and the Marines just get an additional benefit. But obviously we won't see that till we see the new books come out. But yeah, there's my wild conspiracism speculation for the evening, and hope as well, because I want it to happen. I want them to be good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they could have justified Chaos Marines having an extra wound just because they're 10,000 years older.
I mean, that would have made way too much sense, AJ.
Yeah, it also would have prompted mass complaints from old school Marine players, which, you know, we just want to avoid.
It is funny, like, yeah, the way what they've done with tactical Marines, because like you said, I mean, the ATV is always the example I use, Adam, because it's like that is so niche. Like for example, if I was going to replace the Primaris range, if I was in charge, the Space Marine range, if I was in charge of that project, by the time I got to the attack bike, I'd have worked through a lot of the range. And to be fair, they kind of have. There are still some big hitters. You know, we've obviously still got jump pack troops and jump pack characters. And actually, I think what we've seen with kind of the Space Marine Codex is they're going to be less liberal with giving away those kind of buffs. So not everything will be able to take a jump pack or a bike or whatever it's going to be. But yeah, it definitely looks like they're getting towards the end, and I don't know what that means for tactical Marines. But it is weird when it's getting to the stage now where there's going to be literally 2 of everything in the book, just one that's a little bit better.
I mean, in the far future, in 10th edition, there might be 2 books. It might be Firstborn, and, you know, people were speculating about it for this edition, which obviously hasn't happened, but maybe that will happen next time.
I mean, I'm just saying, if I was Games Workshop, what I would do is I would make Firstborn Marines really, really good in 9th edition, and then in 10th edition.
You would annoy so many people.
I would be like,
it's almost like you'd sell off all of the stock that you have and not have to make them anymore. Wow. See, ladies and gentlemen, listeners, we're now getting into the real deep dark.
I know.
Which is good, because to bring it back to Chaos, AJ is, you know, as he said, he's an Alpha Legion player, so this sort of like, you know, what's really going on, who's running with the new world order of 40k.
Yeah.
This is what it's all about, you know.
Yeah, no, I think I am jesting. I think things will probably be fine.
So, I mean, if I may, I guess if I may ask you a question,
Yeah.
AJ, right? You have an unlimited budget. You have unlimited green stuff as well to go with it, right?
Sure.
What do you do?
Needed.
What's your fantasy chaos army? And and you can include things you've already got and expand on those. But like, what is your? You can do anything. What do you make?
So, I mean, I'm already starting, like Emperor's Children for the longest time. The thing that put me off before, and it does still put me off, is that there is no actual Noise Marine kit. You have to buy your basic Chaos Space Marines, and then you have to buy a separate kit which has got the Noise Marine upgrades and weapons, and then you have to sort of bash them together. And because one kit is much newer than the other, they don't actually go that well together. You still need green stuff to make it work. So I'm trying to build my own, and what I've done at great expense is to buy the Cacophony from Forge World, which are like the old school version of Noise Marines. And I've sort of built them as my main troops for Noise Marines just because I think it's so cool, these sonic blasters. And I've given all of them heavy metal hair with green stuff because I think that's cool. And that would be my... It's my dream army, and I'm making it slowly. It's a sort of a project of love.
I really hope, you know, you guys have to invite me when you two play, because the battle of the bands between Adam's sisters and your Noise Marines is just going to be awesome. You know, my armies were quite quiet. You know, they keep themselves to themselves.
We're going to team up. We'll get some sort of like gothic metal going. That's got to be a thing, right? That's good. A bit of organ music with heavy guitar over the top.
Yeah, no, for sure.
I mean, it is interesting. So I've and AJ, to be honest, like this was inspired partly by you. Like one of the things I've got is I've got a load of Chaos kits knocking about, and
For a
you know,
bonfire.
as previously as previously mentioned, I seem to just collect anything and everything because I just think it looks cool. And I've got a bunch of Chaos Marines, and one of the things
Yeah, I'm guilty
I
of
was
that
thinking
too.
of doing was making some Noise Marines. So I went down, you know, similar to you. It's interesting that you went the cacophony, whatever they're called, route with Forge World, because I went and looked at some third party bits sort of manufacturers, and there's a few
we want that GW sponsorship. Like, come on, man. Come on.
and you shouldn't buy them, and you shouldn't buy them, even if they're really good, and a better way of getting away with doing something that isn't Finecast. But no, there is stuff out there that you can use to kind of make your own Noise Marine. So I'm actually still waiting for the delivery. There's been a foul up in the warp, as it were, as far as the post goes. So I'm just having to wait for it to arrive. But I'm very much looking forward to building some pretty cool. I've got some 3D printed ones as well, like Sonic Blaster type things. It just looks amazing. Like they you know, I think you're right. The opportunities to just have really cool looking miniatures that you kind of play around with yourself. The other idea, sorry, I know not to harp on about my hobby. The other idea I've had, which I think might look cool, is I've got the heads off the Stormcast Eternals, like the masks. So my idea is there's a character, for people who don't know, there's a character in the Black Legion books called Telemachus or Telemachus. That's really bad that I can't remember, but he's basically like a former Emperor's Children Marine who joins the Black Legion, and he has this mask that he wears constantly, which is sort of like, I guess, meant to represent like perfection or whatever, which is the whole, you know, Slanesh excess thing. So my idea is to have a bunch of Noise Marines. So I like the fact that yours are going to be very much like Rock Marines, whereas mine I'm going for the sort of like the very the sort of the arrogant, the gilded arrogance, the sort of bejeweled, you know, they're all wearing these perfect masks of the perfect face of their perfect Primarch. I just think that'll be quite fun.
Nice. What colour are you doing?
Well, at the moment, my test is because as we've mentioned before on the other podcast, I love messing about with contrast paint, and very much inspired by our friend Josh, the War Hipster, who does all this stuff in contrast. So I've sort of messed around with the idea of doing like an undercoat of a metallic, so probably lead belcher or maybe dry brushed, like a lighter silver metal, and then putting either Volupus pink or Magos purple, which are sort of like two contrast colours over the top to get a kind of sheen, which is similar, I guess, in some ways as well to the way you do your Alpha Legion, right?
Yeah. My Alpha Legion recipe, for anyone who needs it, is actually gold. So Retributor gold. Then I'll dry brush on lead belcher on top, because the only problem with doing that metallic method is that once it's done, it's really hard to get highlights. So the trick to getting that to work is to underpaint your highlights. So in your undercoat, you can do all your highlights then, and then when you put your contrast paint on top, it'll show through those highlights, and they'll be there like that. So little trick there, hobby trick.
Yeah, and your Alpha Legion, again, you know, guys, check out Alfred Farius on Instagram for sort of the Disco Squid and all the other really cool stuff that AJ's put together, including the Alpha Legion, which just looked brilliant.
Thank you.
No, that's definitely true. Beautiful scheme. Adam, I got to pick up on a couple of things you said. First of all, I know the real reason you're starting Noise Marines is because you hate Eldar, and so that's not good. Let's not kid ourselves here. But also, I got to bring up one thing. So one thing we've been talking about a lot recently is there's Adam actually created a fantastic kit bash when he was a kid. And it is awesome. And
he's right here.
And we've been trying really hard because Adam, has mentioned that he's really interested in getting into Noise Marines, and we really want him to recreate this in
nice.
like as an obliterator. I don't know exactly what you'd count that as today, Adam.
God knows. A Havoc, maybe.
Yeah, maybe a chain cannon. It's not too far off.
So for people who don't know, and I did post.
We'll put it on the Instagram.
We'll put it on the podcast Instagram. It is on mine at ADR Wargaming now. So this is a Chaos Marine from when I was like 10 or 11, and 10 or 11-year-old me, I found it in a sort of box of my old bits the other day, and 10 or 11-year-old me decided it would be a really cool idea, because I think in that edition's, which must have been like third or fourth, in that edition's codex there was this like really good gun that you could put on a Chaos Marine, like just one in the squad, that was a sort of demon weapon. So this thing is like an Imperial las cannon. It's got the ammo section from an Imperial Guard grenade launcher. The barrel is from a Tau burst cannon, and there's a load of sort of blood-covered... Well, I mean, I say blood-covered, they're just slapped on red paint, covered blades on it, which are from Kroot weapons. So this is like 11-year-old me's kit bashing. There's also a green stuff, and we have got a camera system going so we can see each other, and so we'll just hold it up for the guys who are watching this, because obviously we're doing this remotely. But there is a green stuffed, a very thick green stuffed belt and buckle that goes all the way around him to hold this like gigantic gun on, which, you know what, I'm still proud of it to this day, even though it does look a bit crap. Because
you know, I think, mate, that's good for an 11-year-old. That is sick. Like, I think
that's the beauty of chaos. Yeah, just do it. You'll make any ridiculous thing you like, and it works.
Exactly.
I also just love that, man, and I love it when people do that, and I really hope you put him in your army, because you know I've actually done that with my Dark Angels to some degree. So I mentioned
another chaos faction.
Yeah, yeah, it was coming. So like I mentioned in the podcast how I stripped my old tactical marines and I use them, and that's obviously so cool. But another thing for me is so I have quite a lot of Terminators, obviously as a Dark Angels player, but 5 of them are from when I was a kid, and I stripped them and I used like that's actually not bad condition. 10-year-old me did not look after his Warhammer. So like, you know, I had to replace bits with like spares, the Dark Angels parts, Terminator boxes, and that was fine. But like, you know, I have these 5 Terminators in my Terminator Deathwing force, and like they don't match. Like they've got the shoulder pads and the wrong way around, whatever. Because I'd obviously super glued them on because that's what 10-year-old me decided was the best thing to do. But like I use them every time. They just make your army feel so much of your own, and I'm sure Azrael doesn't approve, but like, you know, it's I absolutely love it when people do things like that, and it's quite cool. And yeah, AJ, you've got quite a lot of, you know, old 40k stuff, right?
Yeah, I actually so. Speaking of like 10-year-old me, or 10-year-old us, we would have all been mates.
I was pretty cool at 10, I'm not gonna lie. I've actually gone downhill since then, so that's why
you peaked early. My Nightbringer model, which is like a metal proper Nightbringer, I built that into a Tzeentch Demon Prince, and I've been using it as a Tzeentch Demon Prince. But now I've looked at this Necron Codex, and I was like, oh, what have I done to that Nightbringer?
Is it the same sculpt as the current one? Because the current
it's exactly the same sculpt.
Yeah, it's identical.
It's just fine cast.
The Terminators are still the same sculpt as the ones they are now. They've sat on those for a really long time.
It is funny because AJ and I both got Necrons as well, and we were talking about this, and when you were like, yeah, I've got this Nightbringer, but he's some sort of Tzeentch Prince, and it's like, are we changing that? Like, yes, probably.
Is it going to be an easy one to put back? Like, have you got the scythe or?
How Tzeentch?
Well, I'll need to make it. So, I mean, he's got giant bat wings at the moment, so I'd need to take those off and give him a scythe again.
I think, doesn't he?
Yeah.
I mean, the Nightbringer could have like bat wings. Why not? He's like a death god.
In which case, no changes needed. He's done.
There we go.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I think the Nightbringer will terrify a lot of the Chaos factions. I mean, we don't know because, you know, we can't see the future, but, you know, maybe the Silent King will win, and then maybe he turns off the warp, and then, you know, in fact, all of your Chaos armies, guys, in fact, all of my armies, because they're all people that live in them, there will be no more. Maybe that will happen. But I do love that. One of my favourite things about Chaos as a faction is that they are about the game, and they are not about winning. So we have, obviously, in Devastation of Baal, we have the emergence of the Khorne demons, and you know, obviously the Tyranid Hive fleets. Kind of, they don't really know what to do about Chaos, and obviously that, you know, the Alpha Legion, for example, we kind of know that the aim of the gods is not to put Horus on the throne, but it is to keep the game going for as long as possible. And I just love that. I love that complexity.
Because you realise that Chaos would ultimately lose if they won, because they need that conflict. They need everything to keep going on as it is, because it just fuels Chaos. So, you know, they had a chance to kill the Primarchs, didn't they? Like when they were all babies, but instead they sent them all off, and they wanted this all to happen.
See what happens.
Yeah.
Do you know what? There was a really, so at the time of recording there was a GW preview just earlier this afternoon for their other games, and there was actually, I thought, a really good description that makes to this point we're making. So they've released or they will be releasing for one of the Underworlds games, which is obviously not 40k, it's like Age of Sigmar, like small scale combat. And they're releasing 2 new sets, one of which are a bunch of sort of high elf type, they're called the Lumineth Realm Lords, but they're releasing like a little kit for them. And then they're releasing these new, and again, maybe this leans towards there being something new in the pipeline for Emperor's Children, they're releasing new Slaaneshi models, like a Slaanesh warband. And when they were talking about it on the channel, they sort of said, well, the elves have come to this place where it all happens because, you know, they want to bring the light and bring order and bring good and everything great. And then they went, and the Slaanesh are here because they want to have a party. I mean, that's it. Like they're just here to have fun, which is awesome. Why wouldn't you want that in your army?
No, for sure. Yeah, I mean, Fulgrim, yeah, very, very famously, isn't really interested in in the heresy once he reaches demonhood. He's just all about chilling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably having a great time right now.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because one of my favourite things about, you know, kind of Gathering Storm is just this idea, and as an Imperium fan, it's just like this idea that like Guilliman's return just like enraged the entire warp, just because like in my head, like when I read that line, it's just the most awesome thing to think of. That they all just like all of these, because obviously one of the things GW and the Black Library have to explain is what the fuck have they been doing for the last 10,000 years? You know, obviously Lorgar's been having the shit bin out of him for a little bit of time, but what the fuck was he doing before that? Perturabo, like he every now and then he lobs a demon engine at Abaddon and is like, use this, and and that's it. But like, yeah, like so it you know, the fact that, you know, Gilliam kind of got them off their asses, but maybe that's why, because that's what we're talking about. They were all just kind of like, you know, we've won as much as we can win. We've got this chaos in the galaxy. Humanity is stagnant. This is perfect for us. You know, in terms of the developing story, there's a lot of options there when you're a loyalist. You know, like obviously Primarch's turning. Is there any kind of narrative you would like to see developed on the Chaos side?
14th Black Crusade. And this time it'll be successful.
Yeah, I mean, I think we always forget that actually about how successful Abaddon was in
Wow.
13th. Well, I mean,
Debatable, right?
Well,
Yeah.
well, this is the thing. It's debatable, but is it? Like, Imperium Nihilus is, you know, a fucking travesty. It's awful for the Imperium, and it is an absolute win for Abaddon. I think also one of the symbolisms that I think a lot of people missed actually in 8th edition was Abaddon versus Calgar. So lots of people were a bit upset with when we had Vigilus, because, you know, Abaddon didn't kill Marnie's Calgar, and that would have been a more definitive ending, and we got a kind of like Sunday morning cartoon where, you know, he won but he wouldn't kill him, he left. But the reason that was so big for me, and again kind of harking back to when I was a kid, like, so when I was a kid I didn't know Dante was really a figure. But to me, the 40k narrative was Marnius Calgar versus Abaddon. That was the main hero battle, and Abaddon wins that battle. That's what they did in 8th edition, and that is so big, you know. It ends decades, absolutely decades of hero on hero confrontation, and I think that was kind of missed by a lot of people. Because lots of people were just upset that Marnius Calgar isn't now a dreadnought. But
That would have been cool.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
You know, and it's funny, like you say, like obviously people don't make the memes as much about Theodon or whatever, and he's now got arms that stick on and stuff. But like, you know, people forget how well Chaos has done and Abaddon has done. And I think, you know, with the Black Legion books, you kind of really learn, and you know, and the Horus Heresy, you really learn why people follow Abaddon and why he's just a great guy. And it's really, it's fascinating to me, Abaddon. All right, well, I think that takes us to the end of the show, ladies and gentlemen. So just one more time, AJ, where can people find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram at Alfred_Farius. And it's been great to be on the show, guys. Thanks so much.
Oh, well, thanks very much for coming.
Yeah.
Adam, where can people find you?
I am at ADR Wargaming.
Okay, and you can find me at the Sandman Hobby for lots of lovely hay bales. Thanks very much for listening, and you'll hear us again real soon.